Hello, Cleveland. Welcome to another edition of the 1085 Gridiron Podcast. I am your host, Jack McCurry. Anthony Joki will not be with us tonight on this episode, but I have brought in another special guest. He is a contributor at the Dawgland.com. He is I'll call you a part-time co-host with Paul Brown over on the International Browns podcast. It is Jack Duffin. Jack, how's things going, man?
I'm good. It's always good to chat Browns. The off season is my favourite time of the year, so I'm excited to get into it. It's good. This podcast is always the most bizarre podcast for me because I listen to it, and then it's the only other person in sort of Browns Twitter that I see that's also called Jack. So I'm listening away, and then like Anthony will just say Jack, and I just turn around in my flat thinking, is he talking to me? And it's just like. I should have known better after like 18 months of listening, but it still gets me.
It's okay because sometimes when I listen to Paul and you're on, and he'll be like Jack, and then I kind of want to be like I want to answer, and then I'm like no, he's talking to Jack Duffin. But it's excellent to have you on. We do talk quite frequently through Twitter. I've been on your podcast a couple times. I think this is the second time you've been on here, so it's always a pleasure. I haven't talked to you. Well, I haven't talked to you, face to face since all the changes, all the turnover. I will say, and I'll give you applause, you were right about Dorsey, and I will admit that you were right about all this. I know you took your victory lap once all the changes were made, but I just want to get your thoughts on the new alignment being the key word here with the Browns of Paul DePodesta, Andrew Berry, and Kevin Stefanski.
For me, I'll start with the first one of obviously Depot taking sort of a bigger role. For me, it's a great step. He's not going to get into the nitty gritty. It's very much big picture. And in terms of big picture, I like what I've seen. Banging the table for McDermott over Hugh, Stefanski over Freddie. Those are sort of the obvious things. But stuff like the Osweiler trade was sort of revolutionary at the time. You've now sort of seen smaller scale Dolphins do it. That's the sort of stuff that teams are going, wow, this stuff's clever. So what I've seen, I've really liked. So from the big picture, the guardrails is obviously a really easy thing that we all saw. Everything on there just made sense of what good teams do. If you look around the league and you see, New England do this well, the Eagles do this well, so-and-so does this well. All that stuff was on the guardrails. So if that's the stuff he's doing, good luck. I like what he's doing. He's not getting too involved in sort of the detail and the football decisions, but setting sort of the premises and ideas that these ideas really work. Let's use some of them. So for me, great. Give him more power. And third time lucky. He's been overruled the last two times with his coach he wanted. He's got his shout this time. And Kevin Stefanski then, I'm excited. I think he's done lots of good stuff. Enjoyed what he's done with that Vikings offense that isn't particularly great, and he's got a lot out of them. And the interesting thing, and I said it during the Freddie search, and I'll say it again, we don't have a clue as outsiders. Beat reporters don't have a clue. No one knows. The only people that have sort of a decent steer are those five people. I think it was 4 this time, doing the interviews and sort of selecting, because they can get really into the detail and have that sort of heart-to-heart interrogation where they're going, who's the best person? And it comes down to, do you trust the guy making the decision? Last time I said, look, I don't really trust John Dorsey to make the decision. He's never hired a head coach. I'm skeptical. But if that's who people that are paid to make that decision, good luck to him. I can scout a player. I can sit there, watch tape. I can judge them on their athletics and their metrics at the combine. Can't do that with a coach. So you've got to put a lot of confidence in who's making that decision. And I think Stefanski is going to be a wonderful hire.
And what did you think of them ultimately finally hiring Andrew Berry as the general manager?
I was pretty open to all three. So all three being Ed Dodds, who was, I think he's the number 2. He might be number 3 with the Colts. I'm not sure where he stacks on that, but a very, very good reputation. I was okay with Patton. He was my third out of the 3, but perfectly okay with him. Very well liked within the league. And then Andrew Berry, we know what Andrew Berry is. We've seen him. He was great. He's worked with some great people. Done 7 years of like what you call traditional scouting with the Colts. He then done some time with the Browns. Then went and worked with my man, And if you follow me on Twitter, you'll hear me praising Howie Roseman. If you ever get a spare half an hour, just search Howie Roseman. What was the conference? Walton Conference. Just search that in YouTube. You will get a fantastic interview that explains what he does and all his work going in and leading up to the Super Bowl. The guy's a genius. So Andrew Berry getting sort of a year learning from him is a fantastic thing and a real addition to the team.
Yeah, and while they've aligned their top of the football hierarchy, there was, and that's been the brunt of the debate on Twitter. Elliot Wolff, the assistant GM, that was the surprise, which we'll get to in a second. He parted ways with the organization. Alonzo Highsmith, who I think was the VP of player personnel, they parted ways, and also Steve Mullen, the director of college scouting. I was surprised by the timing of it all, just to see that it happened so fast. Andrew Berry's second day on the job and coming off the Senior Bowl where Wolfe, Highsmith, and Mullen were our lead guys going down because we were still searching for a GM. Kevin Stefanski didn't go. The timing of it was just so odd to me as we're preparing for the draft. But Jack, what's your take on it? Do you think the timing was weird? Do you think that this could have waited till after the draft? Or do you think that Berry and DePodesta wanted to start getting things aligned now just to make sure everybody was on the same page leading up to the draft?
Yeah, it's difficult to know because personally, from an outside perspective, I would much rather you keep everyone in and you sort of see it's about sort of 2 to 4 weeks after the draft that you just see a whole dumping of like scouts, of people in the front office going, we're going to move you on. GMs even get fired, which is bizarre that teams leave a GM in place, do the draft, and then sack them within a month. And it's not for how they drafted. They decided they're sacking him basically before the draft, but leave him there, which makes no sense to me. But I think they probably must have had a sit down and gone, look, here's where we're going. Do you want to be a part of this? And I guess it's worked out that they don't want to go in that direction or whatever role they've been asked to do. But if they started sacking scouts and lots of them, then I would start getting really, really scared because they're the people doing the grunt work. Your Highsmith and Wolfe, I guess, is probably going to be right at that top end, really going, right, let's take in everything that all these scouts are telling us. Let's start trying to rank and do things like that. So I think they're sort of end of the puzzle rather than start. So it's probably easier to move on. The biggest shock is that sort of, was it director of college scouting? I forget the term that he had as a job title, but it was certainly a surprise. I think there'll be a bigger turnover that we see after May. You've sort of got a list of lots of them that got fired when Dorsey came in that might actually come back and were quite well regarded. So you might see almost that flip back. Right.
I mean, Elliot Wolff, we even talked about this earlier today. Like, we kind of thought he might stay. Highsmith, it always seemed like he was going to leave no matter what, just because the rumors were there when Dorsey stepped down that Highsmith was going to get fired or was going to leave. Wolff and them, I know that they sat down today and discussed, and then ultimately they mutually parted ways. And Jeff Lloyd brought up a great point. He said, it's tough to work for a guy that you used to be one of the bosses of. I mean, a year ago at this time, Andrew Berry was below Elliot Wolff in the Browns pecking order. Now Andrew Berry's back. He's above Elliot Wolff, who many would consider to be a potential future GM. I don't think there was any way Elliot Wolff was going to take a backseat to Andrew Berry, even though they obviously sat down and discussed the matter.
Yeah, I thought he would hang around and then either jump ship after the draft or maybe do a year and then move on. It's really hard to judge in the same way it is with coaches, with sort of how the front office works, whose fingers are over what. Obviously, when it comes out and you hear odd things of like this person was batting for this pick, there's obviously lots of 99% of what a front office member does when a draft goes on players that are never picked by that team. So there's lots of work that happens and you never see it. Like John Dorsey was banging the table to draft Johnny Manziel for Kansas City Chiefs. We never know about that, and that's not front and center because the Browns traded up over him. And all of that sort of stuff is really hard from the outside to judge what the involvement and what the sort of credibility of that person is behind the scenes. So that's one where it's hard to know, and it all comes down to, do you trust that person making the decision? And I'm in a position where I'm trusting the triumph of Stefanski, Berry, and Depot, and until they start doing some stuff. If they draft a wide receiver in the first round, I'm going to go off on a rant. It's a position that I never liked drafting in the first round. So Corey Coleman, Julio Jones, whoever that wide receiver is, if you draft one in the first round, I'm going to have a go at you if you're my GM. And while they've got a clean slate, I'm not going to judge Berry on the 16, 17, or the 18 draft class because he had involvement in all three, even though fans only like to talk about two of them for some reason. It's one that let's see what they do. Give them a clean slate. It's a very different position now the Browns are in. Lots of people talk about the 1-31 as if they're all in, they're spending all the resources, and that wasn't what the team was. The team was there to tank. They did it beautifully. The second season, the team wasn't tanking, but we still had Hugh Jackson coaching, which is probably worse than tanking. As the Dolphins proved this year, with a good head coach, you can still win games. Unfortunately, we certainly didn't have that. So I'm really genuinely excited. There is a lot of unknown. You've got a very young team there, but then there's also the upside of, if they're good in their jobs, it's not like Bruce Arians is your head coach where you're going, right, what's the succession plan? Because if Tampa Bay have a good season, it's all about planning for the next head coach, because Bruce Arians is running a sell-by date that is very soon. So I would much rather go on the younger end, the unknown, take that risk, because retreads, Hugh Jackson was a retread. Just because someone's been a head coach before, it's no guarantee it's a success.
Yeah, I agree with you. I wanted a experienced head coach, and obviously Rivera and McCarthy went off the board quickly, but I like that they're going young. They're even like their front office, they already have one of the youngest rosters in the league. I feel like the younger guys definitely relate more to the younger players now. I mean, and this will actually a perfect segue into our next topic, and that's Elliot's father, Ron, who consulted with the Browns. That probably ended today, and he sounded off on the Browns big time. He talked to ESPN's Chris Mortensen, and he said that the Browns and others who rely heavily on analytics are, quote, out of control. And he said, when something goes wrong, who takes responsibility? He says their answer, quote, well, that's what the data told us. He said that's a crock, and that's what got them 1-31. And I just think that this is another example of, and I said it on Twitter, I said the good old boys are churning out their agendas. It's the old school football guys, and obviously Ron is going to bat for his guys, John Dorsey, Alonzo Highsmith, and Elliot Wolff, who all worked together in Green Bay under Ron Wolfe during the 90s and early 2000s. So, and it's, Bill Polian made that comment when the Brock Osweiler trade went down. A lot of these guys just don't get that analytics are here. They're in all sports, and they're sticking around. And you either adapt with the times or you get replaced. And that's essentially how it's going now at this point.
Yeah, just looking at his comments, because it wasn't just NFL he had to go at. The one that really made me laugh was baseball. Where he said, analytics has ruined my fun of watching baseball. It's like the whole idea that you're using data to score more points and win more games is bad for your enjoyment. All I can imagine is he supports a team that had one of the crazy high salary spends of any team. So suddenly the league's become more competitive, so his team wins less. That's the only reason I think he's just sounding off on baseball and going, because if you support, what was it, like the Yankees used to have, was it 5 times more spend than the Astros? And it was like, not the Astros, the Oakland A's. And suddenly you're like, suddenly this team that's got no money is having to compete with me. That's disgusting. And all I can think is just dated. This whole idea that they're going to just sack all the scouts and they're just going to press spacebar and the computer's going to go, oh, you should draft this player at pick 10, or no, you should trade back to pick 14 and get this asset. It doesn't work like that. You're just using data to enhance the decision. In the same way, if you go and buy a car, you don't walk up to the car, look at the car and go, that's a good car, I'm going to go buy that car. You do some research. It's like, what's sort of the market for this car? What's the going price for this car if I was looking to buy it? What else is out there as sort of the choices? Is this a good value car? Is it going to sort of fall apart or got a bad rating? Or is there some like history out there of these cars crash and cause issues within, say, 3 years? That's analytics. As simple as that. And it's just any data you use to make a more informed decision, the better. And it's not going, what does the data tell us? Let's go for that. And in the same way, you don't just go, oh, PFF, who's got the best ranking coming out of college? I'll draft that player. It's a lot more detailed than that. You're looking at who had most success, who's done it repetitively, and stuff like quarterbacks. What is the most stable stat? So the most stable stat they've seen for what is a successful quarterback is unpressured passes in the pocket. They are very constant. And then you have other things like third down success. The Eagles are amazing at it in their run and win to the Super Bowl. But that's not a stable stat. So it was like, well, they're going to regress next year. And it's working out what stays constant, what doesn't. But then at the end of the day, there's that human aspect. And the Astros, Astro Ball, really good book, well worth reading, speaks about it's the balance of data plus people. You've still got to do that scouting. So if you go out and you find out this player's amazing, fantastic at college, projects to be a top 10 pick. Oh, he's also got a weed problem. He's got domestic violence past and other stuff. Suddenly you're like, oh, he might be a value of a top 10 pick. The computer might love him, but that human aspect says we're not even going to draft him. And it's understanding that bigger picture. And analytics isn't the 100% answer. I think DePodesta said analytics in most teams is like 20-80%. We want to move it nearer to something like 40-60. And that's where they're going. It's not like 100%, oh, let's press spacebar and see what the computer says.
Exactly. I think, like a lot of people scrutinize the Corey Coleman pick. He was, analytically, he was a top rated prospect in the 2016 draft. I think they leaned more towards analytics with that pick because if you look at the human aspect, I think they would have realized Corey Coleman wasn't the right pick. He didn't have the heart. He was a complainer. I mean, that showed itself in time. I think they retooled some things and then were getting better drafting. They just didn't get to see their plan through because our owner is very impatient with plans. Like you said, analytics is just one piece of the pie when it comes to drafting, to free agency, to building a roster. Like you said, the human aspect is a big thing, and that's where the scouts come into play. And I feel like that's probably why they'll keep the scouts over, just because they've done a lot of homework on this draft class. And then once it's over, they'll bring in their own guys. But just, for everybody, all the old school football guys that think that they're going to do what you said and just go through a computer and pick players, that's not going to work. I think they learned that the first time and we're implementing that plan. I think Andrew Berry was part of that plan. And I just think he's going to come back in. He's learned a lot. I mean, he's worked under numerous football executives. He's going to go by his instincts and his gut and make the right decisions.
Yeah, and I think one important thing that lots of fans, when talking about players, and I wish my team drafted this player, they make scheme and head coaching completely irrelevant. It's like, oh, we should have got Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes, without Andy Reid, without the Kansas City Chiefs scheme, with Hugh Jackson, is not Patrick Mahomes, the MVP. Stick him on the front cover of Madden. He's taking your team to the Super Bowl. It's just not the same player.
Same with Wentz and Watson. That debate still goes on 3 years later.
Yeah, and what's Wentz proved to be? Not a top quarterback. He just isn't. There's the injury history and there's the other stuff. Watson's now a poor him. Bill O'Brien is killing that franchise, and they basically just signed the death warrant by making him the GM. That's over. Goodbye, Texans. You've just ruined your quarterback. That whole thing's just done. But it's this whole idea that, when scout sort of redrafting based on we should have got this player, head coaching scheme, everything's irrelevant. And then suddenly it's the head coaching search. And these people that work on the basis that head coaching's irrelevant when reviewing drafts are also saying, having a meltdown because they didn't get Josh McDaniels. And it's like, you can't have it both ways. You're saying head coaching's completely irrelevant and Hugh Jackson's just as good as Andy Reid when looking at prospects and going, they should have drafted this guy. But then you're having a meltdown when you don't get your head coaches. You've got to balance the two, and there's ups and downs with either side. And this whole idea that if you got this player, suddenly it was a lot better. But yeah, you look at a player and you go, we got Austin Corbett, and we could have had Gesicki, Cortland Sutton. We could have had who was the other one I kept banging the table for? Harold Landry.
Harold Landry. Yep.
Those were three players, and it's not scouting the draft. I look back to my tweets, and it was who was I banging the table for, going, these are the people the Browns should draft, and that's why I go, look, this is what I would have done. And it's like, you can have the link to the tweet. It's not going, this player went in the 6th round, I think we should have drafted him in the 2nd round because he's great. It's like, you can't just look 3 years later and pull that out the hat. But it's that balance and really understanding we were drafting a player for Hugh Jackson to destroy. So I'm really happy in a way we just kept passing on quarterback until he was half out the door, because the less involved he was with any player, the better.
Yeah, I mean, look what he did with Deshaun Kaiser. Like, he banged the table for him and then tore him down as soon as he started struggling. Like, coaching matters. And, everybody wants to put the blame at, Sashi, Andrew Berry, DePodesta for skipping on Wentz and Watson. Hugh Jackson didn't want those guys either. If he would have wanted them, I think the Browns would have drafted one of those guys. He didn't. And so for everybody wants to point the blame at Sashi, and they're still doing so 3 years later, it wasn't all on him. Hugh Jackson deserves much of the blame for that as well. And Jack, I know you said you don't follow a lot of the Browns fans, the Browns media, but the Sashi wars reignited ever since the Andrew Berry rumors started a month ago. And now that he's back, there's a couple media members that are just bashing Andrew Berry for blaming him for 1-31, blaming him for the so-called terrible drafts when they won't criticize Dorsey for the terrible drafts he had. Like, outside of Baker, Chubb, and Denzel Ward, the rest of his drafts haven't been that great. I mean, Jannard Avery was a good player. They traded him away. Callaway was talented, had his issues. Austin Corbett speaks for himself. Greedy, Taki, Mac Wilson, they're still left to be determined. They did draft a kicker, but that was a negative as well. So, I mean, for as much criticism as Sashi gets, it just baffles me that Dorsey doesn't get the equal share, because they both had their flaws and both weren't the best drafters.
Yeah, no one has spent more assets in a short space of time, I think, in NFL history than John Dorsey in terms of cap, picks, everything, trading players away, cutting players that were quality, and that's another thing. My mate asked me, a Tampa Bay fan, he said, look, I know you don't like Dorsey. What's the 5 best things he did? And included in the 5 best things he did, I had to include drafting Jannard Avery. Even though we'd already got rid of him at that point, it was one of the 5 best things he's done in his time. And that's nuts that you're having to include a player you've got rid of in your 5 best things. And I also included UDFA punter, the Scottish Hammer, because that was a great pickup. But it's like, that's not good when in your 5 best things, and you've spent an insane amount of cap, signed loads of bad free agent contracts. I don't think there's a single free agent where he's really gone in with a solid investment. I think the only one really, Money Mitchell. I think outside of that, there's been nothing great with the free agency class. Sheldon Richardson is good, but he's performing only to his contract. He's not outperforming that. So it's tough. And for me, I don't think it's outlandish to say tweeted it earlier today. I think John Dorsey's GM record in Cleveland is on par with Hugh Jackson's head coaching record in Cleveland. For what he got and what he had the ability to do, it's not great. And to say you can't win with bad players, you've got Josh Allen in the Buffalo Bills, who had an awful season. Take a look at what Josh Allen did. It was not good. I think he had negative expected points added per play when he was passing. I think they also might have had negative rushing. And through phenomenal coaching, they managed to go to the playoffs. And did they have a 10-win season? Was it 10 wins in Buffalo? Yeah, and they were awful. They were absolutely awful, and they won 10 games. And that is the difference coaching can make. So best of luck to Sean McDermott. Did really, really well. But no, it's the frustration that Dorsey's hailed as this martyr. And it's like, let's look at what he spent. Let's look at what he invested. Because if you take away that Ward pick, the only reason that was there because of a Sashi trade back, we take away the Chubb pick, which I'm not going to get into running backs discussion now, but that's only there because of the Osweiler trade. Suddenly you start looking at that draft class and you take out the punter, we traded away a punter that turned into, whatever your opinions on Jarvis Landry are, different time for that one. We turned a punter into Jarvis Landry. A punter. Sashi Brown took a punter and made him into a 4th-round pick that became Jarvis Landry. It's nuts. And then we're like dumping Carl Nassib for nothing. Solid star, solid role player. You've got Ogba went on to play a role for the Chiefs. Obviously ended up on IR. Sean Coleman ended up on IR. There's lots of these players that, yeah, they weren't world-class superstars. And you don't get that you don't have 10 picks in a draft and get 10 starters. It doesn't work that way. But these were solid players that added and should have built out a really good roster. And Darryl Wright's tweet today, and that he's got issues in terms of just having a complete meltdown on Twitter all the time. He is, I don't know if there's a relationship there, but he is the son of Grossi. It's one where he said today, it was something like, there's only 6 players Sashi drafted that John Dorsey kept on his roster. That's not so much a criticism of Sashi. That's a criticism of the not my guys, John Dorsey, just having this whole culture of, oh, I don't care that this player's starting quality. We're going to get rid of him. We got rid of Ogba, Avery, and Nassib, and brought in Chris Smith, Chad Thomas, and I think it was Zettel. And then we ended up with Port Augustine,
Brian Cox.
Brian Cox Jr. There was another street free agent. And it's like, why didn't we keep these other players? And suddenly we already had all the depth pass rushers were there. He threw in Jannard Avery. Great ad. We had a phenomenal, probably the best defensive end unit of 5 players in the entire NFL. And we just burnt it all down for the sake of, I didn't draft these guys. It was frustrating just seeing the talent, and it was like, by all means, trade it away if you don't like it, but you get value. If you get me a 4th round for a punter, hey, I'm having a field day. If you go off and you trade away some of these players and you get a 3rd for someone, a 4th for someone, a 5th for someone, I've got no issue. If you're trading 7th round picks, then it's not good.
It's because we needed real football players.
Yeah. And here's a question I asked someone, and I've been racking my brain to try and work out. Other than Myles Garrett, was there a player that Sashi Brown drafted because he hasn't thrown... because Tonio wasn't a pick. Is there any player other than Myles Garrett who was drafted by the Sashi Brown regime that Dorsey hasn't thrown under the bus at some point in his regime?
Did he throw Ogunjobi under the bus?
There we go. Ogunjobi.
That would be the only...
We're at 2.
Yeah, that's it. Because, Higgins and Njoku speak for themselves, and that's about it.
Yeah, Schobert, we're not doing a deal.
Would appear so.
But that should have been done after year 3. If that deal gets done after year 3, banging the table for it, suddenly you do it before there's an explosion in the linebacker market. So last offseason you had the Mosley deal. Who was the other one? There was two massive
Barr.
free agent bar.
Yeah.
That the market just exploded. We should have got the deal done just before that free agency, and then suddenly you're looking at under 10 million, and now it's like we're not even getting a deal done at 10 million because we're in a position where he is the only linebacker on the roster of starting level. Kirksey, unfortunately, is not there anymore. You've got Mac Wilson. Fans talk about him as if he's like the second coming of Luke Kuechly or something. The way I read it on Twitter,
he gets the Demarius Randall treatment, like, because he's so good with the fans, like he's untouchable now. I mean that's great. I mean, Max seems to be a nice guy, but if he's not making an impact, he's not doing us any favors.
Yeah, him tacky, and suddenly it's like, if we don't pay Joe Schobert, we ain't got no linebackers next season, and it's as simple as that. So that's a dangerous position. You've got Corey Littleton, free agent, banging the drum for. It's going to be a lot of money, but I reckon he's going to be really good.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting to see who gets more in free agency, him or Schobert, because they're both equally good. But I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out. Kareem Hunt, Jack, you wrote a very great article for us over at the Dawgland beginning of the year, talking about what the Browns should do with him. You talked about a potential long-term deal, which seems highly unlikely because we have Nick Chubb. The tender, which seems to be heading that way, potentially trading him. Now with all this news about him getting pulled over by the police, having marijuana in the car, now it comes out that there was an open container of vodka. The cop kind of let him off. I know some people will feel different. I kind of feel like, yeah, he was let off, I think, because of his name and the fact that he is a Browns player. And he also sounded a little emotional, which, makes me think something could be going on with him. Hopefully he's all right. He does have a history with substance. He had to take alcohol counseling after the domestic violence issue. Jack, at this point, if you're the Browns, obviously Andrew Berry's been on the job 2 days. What would you do with Kareem Hunt at this point? Do you still tender him, or do you just move on and look for somebody else as running back too?
So I'm tendering him with a third. When the news broke, my reaction was I texted Paul and then Ian, who also helps out as one of our co-hosts. It was, woohoo, we've saved $1 million. Because that moment itself just takes it from anyone talking about a second round tender. Oh, it's a third round tender now. There's $1 million saved. We can go spend that on someone else. We can give that extra money towards, say, a Schobert deal. Wherever you do, it's a $3 million you can move, because that third round tender, no one's probably signing that. And if they do, I'm taking that third round pick and spend it on a running back. I don't mind. Take that third round pick if someone gives it to you. Spend it on a running back. If not, you keep him for one more year. And look, he might completely do something silly and be gone and he's out of the league. And worst comes to worst, there's no guaranteed money on a tender. So you're only paying for any games where he turns up and plays. And suddenly, yeah, you either get a comp pick or he's out the league. And it's like, either way, I'm happy with that. So third round tender, no one's going to pay that. And if they do, I'll have a party. We'll do another podcast. We'll get out the champagne. We'll have a little celebration dance. But third round tender, job's a good one. Either someone pays it, they'd be nuts. He has a really good year, and then we get a comp pick. The higher, the better. Because we're not going to be in the free. We might float around in the free agent market this year, just with like the new GM coming in. But next year there's going to be no money because Baker and Myles Garrett probably both get paid. So we're going to be boring in free agency. So if he walks, we're certainly getting a comp pick if he signs a contract good enough. And if he's out the league, he's out the league, and we haven't lost anything. So third round tender it is. Literally no money, and let's see what happens. Good luck to him. I really hope he turns his life around. It's not just what happens on the field, because if he's successful, we've then had a good year and we cash in next year.
Yeah, I can't see anybody really trading for him. I mean, it's possible, but I don't see anybody giving up a third round pick for him. Maybe if he signs the tender and then, they negotiate some kind of trade where they get a fourth, maybe a fifth. I just think with his baggage, I just can't see anybody spending anything on him. Although we did get a 5 for Josh Gordon, but we had to give up a 7. But I mean, yeah, I just hope Kareem's okay. I worry about him just because, and the people that he surrounds himself with. Yeah, I just hope everything works out. Because when he's on the field, he helps the Browns. But if he's not available, then that just leads to a lot of distractions. And talent isn't everything, and that's the one thing that some people seem to forget, especially after the Josh Gordon saga. These guys are human. They have their demons and they have their emotions just like the rest of us. So, Jack, you got another article coming down the pipeline. We're gonna drop it on Monday after the Super Bowl, talking about free agency, cap casualties. Anthony obviously couldn't join us, but he sent over. He right now. Who do you think is the most who are you most confident the Browns are going to cut, and who are you the least confident on that the Browns are going to cut prior to free agency?
So I think Kirksey's goner. A really nice guy, and we're not a position where you're going to pay someone. I think the total's about 9 million just because he's a nice guy. Well, you can't do that if you want to be a successful team. You can get into that discussion if they're on 600,000 and they're on the edge of the roster doing a job on special teams. The money he's on, we can cut him at 7.6 million saved. That sort of money goes straight into a Joe Schobert extension. So that goes towards making that deal a possibility. Kirksey's gone. I wish him all the best. When people are saying, "Oh, we'll give him a renegotiated deal," if you phone him up and go, "Look, we think you're worth 2 million, 2.5 million, 3 million a year. Do you want to take a pay cut and sign a 4-year, 12 million deal?" That's going to be a rude slap in the face. You're much better cutting him. By all means, you can say to him, "Look, we're going to cut you. Go test the open market. When you find a contract, come back to us and have a chat. And we might match it. We'll give you the option. We know you love the city. We know you want to stay here." We're not saying never. We're just saying that number's not going to happen. So it wouldn't surprise me. I think you've seen the Patriots do it before of sort of cutting people and going, "Look, test the market, find your value, and we can have that conversation." But we're going to let that market set the stick, because if you phone him up and go, "Oh, we think you're worth 2.5 million a year, sign the deal or goodbye," that's just a horrible way to end a relationship. Cut him, let him test the market, and then get him to come back. And then most unlikely roster move. I'm going to stick with the realistic ones. I'm going to say the trading Vernon. I think he stays. There's 15.5 million saved if he moves on. So just sort of advance warning of next year. So this offseason, we're going to give Myles Garrett his 5th-year option. He's done 3 years, so next year he plays on year 4. And then 5th year, I was looking at the numbers this morning. I think it's somewhere around 18.5 it's going to be million. So more or less Myles Garrett's salary next year plus Vernon's this year. That is the 18 million, 18.5 million. So that money just goes straight away and will consume straight into that. So it's like the final year you're going to be able to have another highly paid person, because you can only really have one highly paid person on the defensive end group. At the moment, that's Vernon. That then becomes Myles, which means you've got to go cheap with the rest of the room. So I think they keep Vernon. But if they can find a really good deal out there, because you're going to get a comp pick for him next season, so maybe say a 4th, I would reckon he could probably get on the market, because pass rushers obviously take a lot of money. I think he'll have another good year. Well, it won't rack up the sacks and things, but that doesn't really matter. You're going to have to look at sort of a 2nd or a 3rd, or a player you really like. So who knows, if they were to look at, say, a deal with a player that I absolutely would love to see in Cleveland is OJ Howard. If you get in touch with the Bucks and go, look, guys, we want OJ Howard. You're not really using him. Do you really want him? We're going to give you let's say a third, and Vernon, we're going to take OJ Howard off your hands. We're going to give him the 5th-year option. We're going to negotiate an extension. That would be a deal I would love to see. Obviously, you then go, look, we're going to need some other way to address the defensive end room. But suddenly you've got like a Hernandez-Gronk style tight end tandem that could cause carnage in the league. So there's a few players out there that I would love to just sort of phone up and go, look, we've got Vernon. What do you think? Because freeing up $15.5 million is not a bad thing to do. It is only for 1 year. And you do get that comp pick in the future. But if you ask me, would I trade 1 year of Vernon and say a 3rd-round pick in the deal and sort of the 4th-round pick you're losing, would I trade Vernon a 3rd and a 4th for OJ Howard and a long-term extension? Yeah, why not? Tight ends are cheap. Let's have absolute carnage.
Oh, I'm all for that too, man. I love OJ Howard. Loved him coming out of Alabama. Was hoping the Browns would trade him, but then they ultimately traded down. Took Njoku. Njoku hasn't been bad. Had a down year last year, but if you could pair them up with what we already have on offense, that would be something fun to watch.
Yeah, because then you're going to rotate it. So if you've got sort of a wide receiver room that is OBJ, Landry, and then because he plays different sets, your sort of 3rd wild card in there is Higgins. Then you have sort of the tight end room. You've got Njoku, and then you've got OJ Howard. Then you've got your running back room, which is Chubb, but then you mix in a bit of Kareem Hunt. And then you've got sort of a fullback that you mix in and use elsewhere. If you then get a fullback that works in that group, suddenly you've just got weapons galore. You don't really need much else. Obviously, you have a few players that you bring in to do maybe a more blocking tight end, maybe a sort of a deep threat, quick wide receiver. But your skill players are locked in there. You don't need anyone else. And suddenly you're like, right, let's spend a load of assets on that, fixing the tackles. Let's fix that D-line, add some linebackers, a bit of extra on the safety and the defense. But you don't need any more skill players. If you add OJ Howard, sort of do a 1 year with Higgins, you're there. But as a fullback, you can just pick up a fullback. Just go down to Walmart. They're on the shelf.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, you can find guys like that, and that's just how the game works. You just bring them in and out, get them on the cheap, and just see how it plays out. Jack, it's always excellent talking to you, bud. We'll definitely have you on again here over the next few weeks as we dive into free agency, bring you on, talk about the cap, talk about what the Browns can't do in free agency. And I'm sure within the next couple of weeks, we'll start hearing some roster moves. They'll start cutting guys. They're at 50 million now. Definitely can increase that cap space number, but you are a go-to guy when it comes to front office and all that fun stuff, man. So appreciate you for coming on. Go ahead and plug your Twitter, plug everything you got going on, and we'll get on out of here.
No, it's just in advance. There's one player that's sort of the early decision they've got to make, and that's Morgan Burnett. Middle of March, they've got a big roster bonus on him. I think it's only like $1 million, but they're going to make a decision before that whether they cut him, because then you don't pay it. So that's the one early one. The rest, there's no real rush on. You might have a player like Hubbard that we just keep all the way to camp and then go, right, these 2 picks, they've done well, you're gone. We'll trade you or cut you. But I'm on the Paul Brown podcast. So it's daily, but work commitments, I'm on maybe once a week. Usually on a Sunday is the random day you're most likely to see me. But with off season going on anytime, who knows? There's no real plan for me. But no, the main place to find me at Jack Duffin on Twitter. DMs are open, so any random cap questions, by all means ping them over. I'll do my best to answer them. Or just tweet me. I can do it on there and answer anything. But no, thank you very much for having me on. Always enjoy listening to the podcast. However much it confuses with my name getting mentioned, but it's you, not me. But no, keep up the great work. Writing some more pieces for Dawgland, just with the off season going on, you're not really going to see much from me during the season because, hey, I'm not on X's and O's, guys. I know where my strength lies. It's on salary cap, roster construction, that part of the world. But thank you very much. Keep up the great work. Love what you and Anthony are doing.
Thank you, man. We appreciate you, and we appreciate you contributing to the site. It's much appreciated. As always, guys, you can follow the show and our website at The Dawgland on Twitter. You can follow me personally at Jack McCurry08. You can follow Anthony at Anthony Joki, Joki. You can find the podcast pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts. Definitely check out thedawgland.com. Like I said, Jack's got a new article dropping this Monday. Go check out the site for everything Browns. And as always, as we get on out of here, go Browns.